started to trot, and it was fine. And then the other horses around her started to trot too. And of course no one was riding them, so they just got faster and faster. And then Flicker started cantering, and I tried to stop her and I couldn't because she was going too fast. And my arms were too weak to stop her. And she got me faster and faster and faster until all the horses were galloping. She was galloping too. And then she must have been really excited because she bucked. And of course, her head went down and her back legs came up, and little Alex sitting on top flew off, and I fell to this side, to the right, and my feet came out of the stirrups and came off, and I tumbled a bit, and then I was lying on the grass. I couldn't move because my back really hurt. And I lay there for a really long time. I don't remember how long. And I could see Flicker, she came back and she was like eating grass around me, and I remember feeling really mad at her.
Third grade, I went up into a tree, and I remember I brought a beanbag chair, and I was sitting up there for a while, and then I shifted my weight and I fell out of the tree, and it knocked the wind out of me, and I couldn't breathe for like 5 to 10 seconds or something, and I chipped a tooth, and they thought I almost had a concussion. And
one time in junior high,
so that was bad.
There were 2 bleachers set up slightly in between each other.
Yeah, it was not the brightest kid.
And just walking between them and stepping over the gap and slipping.
Did you succeed in sitting down?
I did for at least like 10 to 15 minutes. I was sitting up there reading a book, but then I shifted my weight and it rolled over.
And like being suspended in the air.
Knowing it was going to happen.
The bike just suddenly stopped, and I just flew over the handlebars.
Was it fun?
It was before I fell out of the tree.
Kind of the last thing I remember
And having
is
that
this
experience
feeling
with,
of everything
time
stopped.
sort of stops.
And then time slowing down as I came off and predicting
And you
the
think,
landing.
This is about to hurt very
Imagining
bad.
that it was going to
Holy
hurt.
crap, I'm thousands of feet
crap.
above the air. Like,
This is going to hurt.
and I wasn't like
I
prepared for
fell
that.
on the ground. The first thing I thought about was my teeth.
I think it's just one of those things that just happens so quickly that the moment of the fall doesn't even really exist.
It was like a skip in the record. It was just like there was this like momentum through space, strong momentum through space, and strong momentum through time, and then it just skipped for a moment, and then the next moment I was on the ground.
And then I was told by my parents never to put a beanbag chair in the tree again.
Skip in the record.
So the apocryphal story is that Newton was sitting under an apple tree and he got hit on the head by an apple.
Fall was like woke me up immediately.
And in that instant, he understood gravity. And actually, what it was that he was really understanding was that gravity works the same on Earth as it does out in the heavens. So he used that to understand why planets orbit the sun, why the moon orbits the Earth. So what he came up with was this law of gravitation, what he calls the universal law of gravitation, meaning that it applies not just on Earth, but also out in space. And what this law says, it's a mathematical formula, and it says that there's this force, this gravitational force, between any 2 objects in the universe. And it depends on the masses of both objects, so it depends on how big they are. And then it depends inversely, so 1 over, on the distance between them. So this force will be large if either and or both objects are massive or if they're really close to each other. This equation also has this gravitational constant out in front, which is a really, really small number. So gravity is not a very strong force. It's actually a pretty small force. But if you have something that's very massive, like the Earth or the Sun or Jupiter, then gravity, the force of gravity will be strong. But the force of gravity between any two people on Earth is really small. The force of gravity between you and the chair that you're sitting in is really small.
So one of the first things, the first words that my twins know is it's actually not to fall, but it is to fall. So what they do is like they kind of enjoy maybe sitting here and they have something, and then if it falls from the table they say that, which means that it fell. That.
Woke me up immediately.
And then boom, and then
woke me up immediately.
boom, boom,
That. 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 That.
So what Einstein did was he completely revolutionized the way that we think of gravity, which is not, in his mind, is not this long-range force between all these pairs of objects in the entire universe. He thought of it as a much more local phenomenon. So what he postulated, which is the current paradigm, so we think this is right, and it's been tested, and it seems like so far it's right, is that what mass does, any object that has mass, what it does is it warps space right around that object. And the more massive the object is, the more it warps space. So when you have another object that comes nearby, it's trying to travel in a straight line, but it ends up going in a curved line because space itself is curved.
I was not sleeping, so I was looking at the window. It was really hot summer night. So I was looking up, and I saw again another falling star. So, oh, that's how pretty, another one.
So when you think of, for example, the moon orbiting the Earth, according to Newton, there's this force between the two that's not changing as the moon goes around the Earth.
But then, 1 second after I saw it, it continued falling, and suddenly it changed direction.
But according to Einstein, what's really happening is that the Earth itself is warping the space around it.
It's like, what? So I then realized it was not a falling star. It was, I don't know what it was until today.
And the moon is trying to travel in a straight line, and it ends up going in a curved line because space itself is curved.
In order to properly do a back dive and not do a back flop,
It's like rappelling.
you need to
It's this
just
experience
lean
where
back.
like at the edge of something and you anchor yourself,
Lean back
and then you have to like back over the edge.
and keep leaning back.
Jump out of the
But
plane.
you also have like control of how fast
And
you
you have
go.
to trust that
It's this sort of like very controlled
dive
fall.
quickly if you just kind of let yourself go back.
But just that moment where you like could no longer stand on your own feet and you're like totally being supported by this thing that you are also holding on to is like a very frightening
It's a lot scarier than doing a front dive, even though it's the same basic.
Insane sense of falling.
Cheerleader pom-poms. I think they were like my sisters.
I don't think that there's a thinking. I mean, it's like
Absolute helplessness.
Front dive, you can see what you're doing. In the back dive, you just have to commit to it.
I mean, you're so like inwardly focused on your own sense of
Is there a
balance.
guidepost to like
Is
where
this
or
working?
how far?
Is there anything that I see that is breaking?
I just got the egg and I wrapped it in a bunch of like paper towels, but I just mean like a lot.
We would go to like church camps, and they'd always have like try to incorporate outdoor activities into like
Set of an
some
offering.
kind of religious
Full lengths.
metaphor.
Dialogue with the carbon.
And so invariably you do the trust fall.
Which is the story of this nunnery during
my least favorite thing in the world.
The nuns were resisting.
And at one particular program we went to, the trust fall wasn't just like leaning backwards into someone. You went up onto this like 4-foot tall platform.
This giant cross, probably 30 feet tall.
And you fell backward into a group of like 6 people, like who were holding arms across each other, and they would like catch you
on the back of the stage, and they had it on wires.
Except I'm also like really terrified of heights, so it was falling backwards, basically like 4 or 5 feet off the ground, and these people I didn't really know.
Absolute helplessness of moving your limbs.
It was so terrifying, but another layer was like,
I don't think the pom-poms were very effective.
Instead of it just being like, oh, are you brave? Like put your faith on the line.
And then I just put it in like box after box that was like stuff with music.
Because it was like about trust and trusting the Lord and all these things. So you're peer pressured into doing this terrifying fall. And I remember doing it and like afterwards I threw up because it was so terrifying.
But instead of going up, somebody had turned it in the wrong direction and it started going down.
I did not
It hit the
reinforce
stage, loud thud, and then it kept going for the night. It was across the room.
Like it got thrown off the roof and like smashed on the ground. Like the boxes broke, and all the paper towels and the pom-poms went everywhere. But the egg survived because it was just like wrapped in so much stuff. But it looked like a mess. I mean, it hit the ground like a dramatic car crash.
Every mass, everything in the universe pulls on everything else. Matter just has an intrinsic desire to be all together. And that is the fundamental force of gravity, is that every atom in the universe pulls on every other atom.
If you're falling down, you did something and then you're out of control until you
jump out of the plane,
hit the ground, whatever. If you're falling asleep, you're sort of not
moving your limbs, sort of like a bug.
Really in control. All the students like doze off and falling through the air. You're sort of going through that. It's kind of not their fault. You can't really help that they're dozing off. And then falling in love is the same. Right? I don't think anybody is control.
You have to look up and make sure the parachute
sneaks up on you. Yeah. Okay.
About philosophy of physics or whatever, but when they talk about gravity, they talk about things like the value of big G, like the gravitational constant, which is like a fundamental feature of physical reality in our universe. So in some sense, because we know like the value of G, it could have been different. It could have been 2G or 1/2 G or whatever, and then everything would look different. All the planets and stars would develop differently.
I mean, these wings, if I could fly like really close to the sun,
and you're sort of flying
melted.
To look up and make sure the parachutes okay, sort of flying.
Big G kind of plays a role in explanation, or plays a role as like representing the end of explanation. When you explain why you need as much concrete as you do for the stadium, or why solar systems are the size they are, if you can reduce it to the value of the fundamental constants, you've reduced it as far as like the human mind can penetrate, and then you're done. And it's important, I think, for us to stop there
Because if you don't, then if you try and go further than that, you start explaining more fundamental things in terms of less fundamental things, which is getting the order of explanation backwards. So it is important to stop somewhere and to stop at the right place.